All right. Apologize for the last minute change. So thank you for those of you who could join me tonight. I do appreciate it. I know it's hard when there's last minute changes. Sometimes that doesn't always work, but so module 11, this is where we talk about literacy. So let me share my screen. And the para strategy. So I marked it. I thought I marked it on the reading review page. It's marked. One second. I'll make sure no one's in the waiting room. Okay. So can you guys see the read and review page?
Yes.
Okay. So I marked, this is where the para strategy is explained. A couple different things. A lot of people ask, what's the difference between, reading and speech? Well, there's a lot of correlation, and literacy, whether you're working with a young client or an adult client, both, how do I describe literacy is crucial to our life in a variety of ways. From a functionality standpoint, we need to be able to read directions, read signs, read some basic things, as well as we read for enjoyment, we read for entertainment, we read to learn. So reading is what I would say a critical skill. And obviously, when we're looking at functional critical skills, speech address that, as well as other therapies. And for the most part, if we look at kind of the literacy hierarchy, there's lots of different resources in here. So a lot of people are like, what's important? And I hate how little this gets. One second. But I like this visual. Because first step in literacy and language is listening. And obviously, as speech therapists, we're working on that receptive language piece, as well as talking. So talking, obviously, if we're working on expressive language, that's a piece that we work on as far as therapists go. And then when we look at reading and writing, I think of that more in the academic realm, but that's how you use your language skills in an academic way. And I think language skills are the basis for a lot of things. So not just academically, cognitively, as well as your social emotional being. So a lot of times we're working on those precursors of literacy, not necessarily literacy exact, or what I would call traditional reading instruction. So we kind of do some of those foundational. A lot of times with speech or tic, or even that sound awareness, a lot of it we're working on phonological awareness. But really, you have to have some listening, and you have to have some receptive language understanding, as well as expressive language to engage with literacy. So I guess I should say engage with literacy verbally. I think when we're looking at our young population, our birth to 3, a lot of that listening piece, or developing the listening skills, and that's where a lot of that vocabulary and language learning can take place at that listening level. So a lot of times in early intervention, we're working with our clients and they're not even able to sit and listen. So we're kind of working on, how do we sit and listen? Okay, listening is kind of the precursor to talking. And then, we've got reading, writing, and obviously when we're looking at written language, if you can read, a lot of times, not always, there's lots of variables in there, but typically speaking, your reading's better, your writing is better. I can't say that's an always direct correlation, but that's kind of the general guidelines. So looking at language and literacy development, some key pieces here. There's a lot in here, and it's a lot of repetition of information. And some of this we just inherently know as adults, and some of our own backgrounds, we understand the importance of literacy. So looking at just understanding book knowledge. So a lot of times I worked in this program for inner city as kind of a side volunteer thing, and just learning, how do you interact with a book? How do you hold a book? How do you open a book? And what's the purpose of a book? So definitely look at kind of the basics. So listening and understanding, I think it does a good job. Hold on, I do not like this view at all. 1 second. So that listening, that birth to 18 months, listen to words, they're turning their head to sounds, identifying sounds, follow simple directions. So that's where like that pointing or show me. And they're attaching the meaning to the sounds. And then we can kind of look at the adult, you know, pair words with actions and objects when we're looking at how do we facilitate that. So it kind of gives you examples. And that's where sometimes when you look at those hand gestures and things that go with certain things, it's helpful. That's that multi-sensory piece, multi-sensory learning piece. And so you can kind of go along, it kind of shows you some, what is the infant doing? What is the adult doing? And it's kind of nice to kind of see, okay, 18 months to 3 years. What are we doing? How is this helpful? So literacy in general. And I think anything with a book can be language building for the most part. And then that print awareness. So just understanding these letters together form a word. These letters together represent a piece of our language. So I like this. I think it's pretty, what I would say, self-explanatory. I like this little resource. I think it just helps give you the bare bones. So this kind of looks at kindergarten to 2nd grade. This talks about the para strategy. Hold on. Somebody told me that this link didn't work, but sometimes you accept the cookies. Sometimes you have to try a different browser. So you can kind of look at literacy. What is literacy and how is language? So I kind of like how should I read to a child? I like that. How to work on pre-reading, phonological awareness, and reading comprehension. Obviously, a lot of what we do as therapists, we're not necessarily doing reading comp, but as adults, when we're checking on that cognitive rehab piece, can they read directions? Can they follow directions that they read? Can they write a list of information? Can they formulate a question? Can they write a question down? Because a lot of times we're looking at our adults with aphasia. That verbal piece might not be there, but they're able to write it. So sometimes, depending on where the injury happened, it's like what pathway is the most readily accessible for them to use to communicate. So just kind of looking at how much we base in that literacy piece, it's a huge component of language. And then looking at kind of that next level, that figurative language, what does that mean? Making inferences, super important. I think our educational instruction in English language arts really focuses heavily on that, making inferences and just some other fun stuff. So if you kind of look, I like this as a nice fun resource. And just there's some downloadable stuff you can do. There's some good articles on here. So that's just a good resource page. So I like this little visual. So making connections. When we're reading, how does it remind you of a story or book you've read? How does it remind you of a personal experience you had? What does this say? And, how does this relate to things in the world? So there are some good super duper handouts also. So I really like these. These are great resources. And I think as therapists, the number one thing we can do, and I think this holds true for our adult clientele also, a lot of times, if we want to improve language, reading, listening, engaging with some of those literacy pieces are super helpful to develop language, to regain language you lost. So that's the other piece with our adults, that reading or listening. So sometimes in the rehab hospital, depending on where somebody's level's at, a lot of times I encouraged family members to, sit and read to them, what's a genre they liked, or what's maybe one of their favorite books to help kind of open those pathways. So it's kind of listening is one pathway versus that literacy, that visual piece is another pathway. And then also kind of helping them make the connections. Okay, we're talking about a boat, and let's say that, you know, they went to the river for a vacation. Remember we were on the boat? Remember when we went water skiing, or remember when we went fishing? So the nice thing too is literacy gives us some schemas, some things. So let's say no one's been fishing before, but you read a book about fishing that gives you kind of more awareness about it. So that's what I also like a lot about literacy that I don't think is really blatant. I think it helps build schemas. So I think a lot of us can read about something, even if we haven't physically done it, to have an idea of maybe what that's like. So I'm not saying doing it is always, of course, I think preferable, but reading about something and what that is, or if you've ever kind of read, I don't know, you're doing something new you haven't done. So what's the procedure for, you know, we were just talking about being in the COVID lines to get your shot. Well, that's a new thing. I don't know if any of us have done like drive up shots before. I don't think that's a common schema. Well, how does this work? And what does this do? And then we were talking about how do they keep the vaccines cooled and things like that. So that's a new schema for us, and how you would read about it and learn. And, you know, if it was different when it was heavy traffic versus you could just drive right up, you know, stick your arm out and get a shot and call it a day. But although it's not a simplistic form of all that, but just some of those things that usually if we don't know, we usually try to read up, or you've done something new, you're doing something new, or going someplace new. So sometimes if we plan a trip, what do? We read Yelp reviews. We maybe read an article or a blog about cool things to do, you know, in Phoenix, Arizona, cool things to do in Sedona, that kind of thing. So a lot of times we read to help develop these schemas that we don't know. Okay. Whoops, sorry, I don't want to go there. So the para strategy. So I want you to read it. So a lot of people were like, oh, I don't see it right away since it didn't say para strategy, but it's in there. So integrating a book into therapy. So what we're looking at is, this is a real basic, it's not anything too elaborate, and basically picking a book. So, and I said a child, obviously adults, you absolutely can do a book with an adult. In fact, I do often when I've done adult rehab, and it's usually something that the family lets me know, hey, they like this topic, or they enjoyed this magazine. Magazine's actually a fun one to do, especially as someone's kind of trying to access the language, and usually they have an interest or a magazine they've read on a regular basis. So, you know, even I don't know, I'll never forget this lady. She couldn't really, she had a hard time with her family members' names, but she read, you know, like In Touch and People and all that. And so we brought some of those, and I mean, she can name every celebrity. It was great to see, but it was like starting to open those pathways. So it's something she was familiar. It was great. And then her and her partner would bring the magazines, they would start talking, and then she was starting to able to access her language. So what I like about it is just here's some goals. How are you going to use literacy with this? And the nice thing is, and I really like this, so if you are ever my SLPA, you'll see, you know, client be able to retell the story with an appropriate beginning, middle, and end. So if you've ever talked to somebody and you don't know what happened in the beginning, you didn't know what happened at the middle or what happened at the end, and many times those are key pieces you need to know, especially when you're retelling important information versus just maybe, you know, an event that happened. So I like that piece, kind of having that cohesive beginning, middle, and end. Literacy is great. You read a book, you read an article. Okay, what's the beginning? What's the middle? What's the end? Or identify important vocabulary. So oftentimes, and these can really relate to functional things, talking just about your average basic rehab goals versus academic language goals versus clinic outpatient goals. So I would say every adult, whether they're, or every person who's a caregiver, so it's usually an adult, when they have a client with a communication disorder of some kind, I think every person, whether that client is a child or an adult, they want them to be able to retell information. They want to be able to give them valuable information for something that person wasn't there for. So, your kid goes to school, what happened in school? Your spouse goes to the doctor, what did the doctor say? Hey, you called the mechanic, they took it in, what did they say needs to be done? So things like that, can they come up with what's important, kind of that beginning, middle, end, or kind of moving further from that is what's the problem, what was solutions, what are the options, or here's was their response, this is what we needed to do, this is what we need to do, this is what's going to be next. So kind of there's usually a 3-part to any kind of event, story, informational, relay of information. So the other part is identify important vocabulary. So what I like about working with literacy is usually you can see the word in the context. You can see the purpose of using the word. You can understand how this word maybe is used in different ways. So something like a problem, oh gosh, I'll never forget this client I had with autism, and we're talking about math problems, and he just couldn't get the idea that that was like an equation. It was like a math, and just he would get so hung up on the word problem, did not like us using the word problem in math. And I would chuckle because sometimes we have those multi-meaning words and we just don't even think about it. We just use it as part of our vocab. So I like this, and I put 8 to 12. This is what I want to know. Can you say, can you pick a book? Can you use the book to incorporate this goal target? So pick a book. How are you going to facilitate answering questions? Pick a book. How are you going to facilitate retelling the story? So what I like to do, my little trick I learned when I was poor and had no money to spend on supplies, what I often did, and I used books quite a bit, is that, Goodwill and secondhand stores have really extensive amount of books. And like I said, I do this now. I will often go by Goodwill. I'll check out the books every time I walk into one. I usually buy some. Most of them are 99 cents or sometimes less. And, and I'll buy duplicate books and I'll cut them up. I have the snowy day is one of my favorite ones because there's a lot of S blends. There's a lot of, issues. He takes a snowball and, what happened? The snowball melted. Lots of different goal targets with that book. And I cut up, I have a nice one that's hardcover. And then I have one I cut up and laminated. I've done it. I probably cut that book up 2 or 3 times and have made picture resources, worked on vocabulary from the actual book. And it's cheap. That's way cheaper than me finding something on TBT, printing it out in color, or laminating it. I just cut it up, laminate it. I do that pretty often, and I actually like having the actual real pictures with the book, but maybe that's because I've worked with a large population of clients with autism, so that they like the literal, the snowball looking the same in my visuals versus something from clip art. But the good part about it is sometimes you can start there and then kind of move to more abstract or not the same. So it's like, matching like pictures. And so that's kind of some things that I do. And I love, it's never failed me. Lots of great, what I would say, children's books. Then when I was working with the adult clientele, really explaining, okay, have you read the book? A lot of times, have you seen a movie? If there's a movie, what do you know about the author? Talking about the author, and sometimes visuals. So depending on what it is, you know, obviously you're reading a celebrity magazine, it's pretty easy to access some other pictures, but just looking at functionality of things. Okay, the book is about, I don't know, I remember this one person I worked with, he was into like Formula One racing, and he was from a different country, and I was learning about some of the drivers, and there was like 4 or 5 popular ones that his wife was telling me about he really liked. So we started with real pictures. Okay. And one was a biography that he's read a few times. So here's a biography of so-and-so. Okay, who's this? All right, what's this? And then we started trying to recall, because he knows where all the racetracks and stuff were. And she was trying to have him remember places from his country, his native country. So she was great in helping me. And then she got into it. Okay, here's this. Okay, remember, you know, this racetracks here, and we went on a vacation, you know, 1985 to here. So she was great, like finding how do you make the visuals, and the visuals are to make the connection. So literacy is just, I think, a great starting. When in doubt, get a book. When in doubt, use some pictures related to a book is usually a really good place to start. So yeah, slides, someone's like, can you, and I'm sorry, I'm such a Microsoft person. Yes, so you just answer the para strategies. So you go and really just kind of have enough information, kind of those books with like one sentence were real, like what I would say, basic books can be a little bit challenging to do the Paris strategies with. So that's why I say 4 to 6 sentences is a good target. And read and review summary. And then just a 2-paragraph reflection about how literacy can support language. So this one doesn't really have what I would call a quiz, because there's so much broad information about literacy. And to me, it's really kind of that next level language. You use literacy to facilitate language. You use literacy and language to interact. You use literacy to kind of build connections, build schemas, or retell information. But like I said, functional, just following a recipe, that's literacy. I have one particular high schooler. I think she's going to be a chef, or she was a chef in her former life. That she can read some recipes and she'll bring them in, and we'll talk about them. And you know, she's a much better cook than I am. We've done some of these, and it's been fun for her to explain to me how to do something. Oh gosh, what was it? Folding? Was it saying folding? You know, you don't mix it, you fold it, and which was fun because that's like a multi-meaning word. And I had her explain it to me. It was great because she really got a lot of vocabulary and understanding from, you know, following recipes, and, you know, food's her passion for sure. In fact, I told her she needs to come cook it for me, and I'll learn how to make a few items. I'm definitely not a cook at all, but that's for this week. Hopefully, if you have any other questions, yeah, look at that one. It's like floating on a sea of talk. I don't know why it downloaded like that, but the para strategy's in there. And any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the Paris assignment.
Sure.
So I already did it, but I didn't know if you wanted, like, I put it in a paragraph.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking for, did you look at it? Do you understand it? And that's kind of, to me, those are kind of just your basic things you go through after, you know, working with a client. If you go through those strategies, I think it's helpful. And those are kind of just a good starting point when you're doing therapy too.
Okay.
So yeah, paragraph is fine. No problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm trying to get caught up on grading. So if something's not graded, please check the, please. Hold on. Is it recording? Okay, yeah, sorry. I just got a note. It looked like it stopped recording. If it looks like it's not graded, check to make sure I didn't leave you a note of some type. So sometimes, or if you think I missed it, let me know too. There's a couple that I think I want to go back. I'm not done with all of the expressive language ones. So I am not done with those. So probably by Sunday, if I'm not done, send me a message. I am working on those. But if it looks like it was opened and I viewed it and there's no grade, check to make sure I didn't leave you a message. Okay. All righty. I thank you guys for joining me on a last minute change. Like I said, I had a lot of last minute changes this week. I apologize, but you know, you have family show up, they haven't seen in almost 2 years. That's kind of crazy. But if there are no other questions, thank you. Have a good night.